Hello and welcome to the Bentley InRoads V8i workshop. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you're as excited as I am to learn InRoads. We'll be going through some of the fundamental tools that make InRoads such a powerful program. But before we jump in, we need to understand how InRoads files operate in order to be successful using InRoads. InRoads utilizes individual files that contain specific data depending on the file type. These individual files can be reused across multiple projects. You see here the 5 most commonly used InRoads file types. The first is the surface file, or DTM. This is a digital terrain model, which represents the physical terrain. The surface files contain random points, break line, and boundary data. On top of that, they also contain triangle data. These surface files represent either existing surfaces or your design or proposed surfaces. Secondly, the geometry project files, or ALGs, are your alignments. They house your vertical and horizontal alignments, as well as COGO points. In the top right, we have the template library files. These files store templates and components. You see here a typical section of a roadway with the cut and fill lines as well as the roadway components. These templates are then dropped into the roadway design files using the roadway designer. The roadway design files are a combination of the template files and the alignments. On the left there you see the alignment files, and on the right you see the templates. This combination creates your roadway design. Lastly, we have our project files. Our project files are just text files, but they house the locations of the other files you were working with so that you can easily open multiple files at one time. You can always open InRoads files individually, but the project files are a nice way to open many files at one time. There are many other types of InRoads files that you may come across when using InRoads, but for now, let's jump right in and see what it looks like. When you launch InRoads, this MicroStation File Open dialog will appear. This is because this version of InRoads runs on top of MicroStation, so we need to open a DGN before we can open any InRoads files. We're going to go into the Practice folder under your InRoads webinar dataset that you should have downloaded and unzipped to the root of C. So in my Practice folder, Practice Lesson 2, Starting InRoads, and click Open. Now this opens MicroStation with InRoads on top of it. This is InRoads right here, this floating dialog. Looks very much like, say, Windows Explorer, where you have your tree over here on the left and then your information over here on the right. This is called the workspace bar, or your control center. Over here on the right is called your feedback pane. This is where all the details and information will be displayed about whatever's selected in our workspace bar. So as I select this default surface, you see the features of the surface show up here on the right. This is just an empty surface, so there's actually no data in this default surface. Down here at the bottom, there are some tabs which show the other tabs that we have available to us. So we're on the Surfaces tab right now. There's also a Geometry tab. If I tab over here on the right, there's a Preferences tab, Drainage, Templates, Corridors, and Site Modeler. You can either tab through these using the left and right arrows, or you can just right click on any of the tabs and it comes up with the list of all of them. That is a quick way that I will use to get from one tab to another. Below these tabs is the InRoads status bar. This displays all the command details. If ever you are wondering what InRoads wants you to do next, you can just look at the status bar and it'll tell you. Either that, or you can look down here at the MicroStation command line down here at the bottom left. This is very similar to the InRoads status bar, and it also tells you what MicroStation is looking for you to do next. I will refer to these throughout this workshop so that we know where we are at in our command. At the top, we have our standard menu bar with all of the different menus available. These are where all of the tools that you will use are located. We're going to be spending a lot of time in the surface and geometry menus because we will be talking about surfaces and geometry projects in this workshop. This version of InRoads runs on top of MicroStation. That means that all the InRoads data is going to be displayed in the MicroStation. So all the graphics are in MicroStation, and then all the data will be in InRoads. So what that means for you is that anytime you want to delete some of the graphics in MicroStation, you can use the MicroStation tools to delete those graphics, but that data will still be in the InRoads files. So you don't have to worry about deleting alignments or any other type of data just by deleting the graphics. First off, we need to open an InRoads file. What we're going to do is go to the File Open dialog. Over here under the File menu, there's an Open dialog. This brings up the InRoads Open dialog. Now, because our DGN file was in Practice Lesson 2, that is where the folder will point us to for opening InRoads files. Firstly, we want to open a preference file so that we can set up all the preferences for how we want our InRoads data to be displayed in MicroStation. To get to that preferences file, we need to go up not one level but 2 levels. So up 2 levels to the InRoads Webinar Dataset folder. In there, we should have a standards folder and then a preferences folder. This InRoads training.xin file is a preferences file that has all of the data of how we want our graphics to be displayed. I'm going to click open. You'll notice in the InRoads Open dialog, the Open dialog does not automatically close as soon as you open a file. We see down here in our status bar that the preference file was opened, but the Open dialog is still open because InRoads allows us to open multiple files at one time, so it keeps open the Open dialog. So now that we've opened it, we can just hit cancel to get out of the Open command. So now if I right click on my tab down here and go to Preferences, we'll see that this Preferences file that we just opened is now loaded in our InRoads file. Now that we have set our Preferences file to look at this InRoads training.xin file, why don't we go ahead and open a surface file. So under the File menu on the InRoads interface, I'm going to go to the Open where we just were. It should open us again to the Practice Lesson 2 folder, and there should be a couple files here, an ALG and a DTM. The ALG is the geometry project file, and the DTM is our surface file. We're going to open up the existing ground.dtm. I'm going to just hit open. We see it's opened successfully down here and in our status bar in InRoads. Now I'm going to hit cancel. I'm going to make this a little bit smaller so we can see what we're working with here and move it up to the right corner.